architect for Checkpoint, working in the UK and Ireland. I've got with me Matt. Matt, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, morning everyone. So Matt Irvine. I look after the commercial side of our CloudGuard offering, which is everything to do cloud-related technology and security we do here at Checkpoint. So today we're essentially not telling you more about Checkpoint products like previous webinars you may have been on. Checkpoint commissioned cybersecurity insiders to go out there and do a survey of 650 cyber professionals around cloud. So today is more of a session about understanding what those statistics and views look like, and albeit you might be kind of a little worn out by WebExes, but we're really keen for interaction in this session. So there is a chat box on the right-hand side. It is anonymous, so feel free to write in there. We won't necessarily broadcast who you are and where you're from. And I can read my kids' teenage WhatsApp messages, so don't worry about spelling and grammar. I'm sure we'll decipher what it says if it's hurriedly typed. There's about a minute delay on the platform from us speaking to messages coming in, so don't worry if we don't get immediately back to you on your question. But this is an interactive session. This is a view of what we see, what the report says, and we'd really like it to be about what you see as part of that as well.
Brilliant. So the Cloud Security Report is something which Checkpoint has worked on with a partner, Cybersecurity Insiders, for, I think we've had one for the last couple of years now, and it's aimed to be, as much as it can be, a non-biased report by a third party who goes out and surveys different staff for different positions within different types of organisations to make sure we get a broad sampling of what people are doing when it comes to public cloud and some of the security controls that they're adopting when it comes to those platforms. So to start with some broad kind of statistics around cloud adoption, I don't think there should be any surprises in here to see AWS, Azure and GCP leading the pack. Some interesting stats around how some of the other platforms have shrunk in their consumption, and people have obviously tried one of the more niche offerings in public cloud, but ultimately ended up going for one of the big three. This isn't something surprising, and I think it's fairly safe to say that if we were to pick on anyone in the audience now, you would probably roughly agree with us and say that yes, AWS, Azure and GCP are the go-to platforms. There are some offerings and modern services available in the other platforms which are quite unique. Ali Cloud is probably more appropriate for the international markets. If you're a larger company with a broad coverage when it comes to global services, and that might be something we've looked at. Typically speaking, with the UK and AWS and Azure, with Google Cloud being the runner-up, so to speak, for us at least.
And just on these statistics, when I first looked at them, I kind of was quite surprised at how those bars look. This is just that they've got workloads in those environments, not necessarily the percentage of workloads. So from a UK and I perspective, we see predominantly public cloud space dominated by AWS and Azure, with Google kind of coming into the market quite rapidly, with another depending on the type of environment and type of services you want. So this isn't the percentage of cloud footprint. This is just whether or not you're present in one or more of those organizations.
Yeah, and this is not in relation to Checkpoint. So this is about the customers that contributed to the survey, how many of them have come back and said that they are using a particular technology. Bear with me a second. A bit of an echo. Okay.
You good, Stu?
Yep, still here. Sorry, just had a comment saying there's a bit of an echo, so I'm going to try and get rid of that. There we go. So let's move on to so multi-cloud adoption, this is something which is quite an interesting topic. A couple of years ago, when we started talking to customers, they were quite hesitant to move to cloud. That's actually about 3 or 4 years ago. To see now that 68% of customers surveyed are now using 2 or more public cloud platforms is quite promising when it comes to public cloud adoption, and seeing that people are spreading the risk across the multiple cloud platforms, trying to make sure that they've got the highest possible availability that they can get. And again, also trying to take advantage of more of the technology that's available on these platforms. Now, one of the risks associated with this is that if you consider that moving to public cloud for any typical customer can be quite a journey, and there's quite a lot involved with it when it comes to skills and training. We've actually got a slide on that coming up shortly. So if you're taking on multiple cloud platforms, this can quite dramatically expand your attack surface when it comes to security. So if you're using one platform with one set of tools and your team are used to managing one way of doing things, if you're introducing a second or a third cloud platform, those platforms might have drastically different technologies in place to give you effectively the same thing. For example, if you're looking at AWS, you've got ACLs and security groups. If you've got Azure, you've got NSGs. Google Cloud Platform has got its tag-based firewall, which is a completely different technology. And with all of these different tool sets and workflows, it can be quite difficult for customers to get the same level of security across those public clouds. So deploying them, great, they're all very easy and very accessible to use, but when it comes to gaining a consistent approach to security across the clouds, that can be quite an undertaking.
So yeah, we're seeing more customers, especially in the larger enterprise, who look at having a primary and secondary cloud provider. And when they make those decisions, usually for 2 reasons: just the types of services they can get from said provider, but also to drive better commercials with competition in that space. Most people are used to working in public cloud platforms in silos, so it's very difficult to play one vendor off against another. We're seeing the enterprise space definitely doing that now, but they're not considering the security challenges when doing that. So it then becomes 2 very siloed platforms as they start to build it, and it's only when it gets down to the granular level of how they look at holistic views of securities and start talking to us that it becomes a bit more of a challenge.
Thank you, Matt. Right, so what people see as is they see public cloud being riskier than traditional environments. So this is an interesting one, and it's certainly changed over the years. So when I first started doing public cloud and cloud security solutions with Checkpoint, the opinion was generally that if you're going into cloud, things are more secure. So rightly or wrongly, they would believe that when it comes to public cloud, the cloud service provider would give you some sort of built-in security, which I think now we've moved on a couple of years, people are aware of the shared responsibility model and that the cloud isn't magically secure. So I think looking at this particular statistic, the worrying part is the people that think public cloud is safer. So 52%, about just over half of people are aware that there are risks in public cloud, there are risks in private cloud, there are risks in data center. The worrying part is the people that think that it's lower and significantly lower when it comes to moving into public cloud. So whether or not this is the myth that cloud is magically secure, or it's a misunderstanding or lack of understanding in the shared responsibility model, not sure. But I think in general people are quite aware of the fact that moving into public cloud isn't inherently more secure. It's not necessarily less secure either. Cloud isn't an insecure technology or place to be, but it does have different challenges. And again, coming back to what we'll cover in the next slide around training and skills, it's just different. There are new things in public cloud that are configured in a different way, especially when it comes to some of the newer architectures like serverless. Your traditional approaches will need revisiting and reassessing because they don't work in public cloud.
One of the factors that we see is the way that cloud is built, it traditionally starts very small. So it starts with a development team with a small niche project that grows into something far more significant. And in those early stages, things are defined which later grow into something that hasn't been kind of addressed by the security team. So all of those years of understanding what your company's security posture looks like and how it's been built out in the data center aren't necessarily shared on a small cloud project. But obviously, as that workload grows and other workloads are built around it, then that footprint then kind of needs to be either re-engineered or addressed. And we see that, early planning, early involvement across teams, so security people talking to developers and cloud architects is the biggest challenge, really. It's not a technology, as Stuart says. A lot of the technology is there and readily available. It's having the understanding of what you should secure early on. And because they're built in small services and grown, there's not necessarily the attention drawn to them as there would have been in days where big deployments were happening in data centers.
So Barry, this is something we've already touched on, and what people see as an issue when it comes to moving to public cloud. And this is somewhat reassuring in contrast to some of the previous points. So 55% of people are concerned that moving to cloud will mean that they don't have the staff skills and the training for when it comes to public cloud. So I've mentioned moving to public cloud isn't something which is inherently insecure. But if you've got any hands-on experience with the public cloud platforms, be it AWS, GCP or Azure or any of the cloud platforms, you know that things are very different when it comes to configuring something that you've got years of experience configuring in your data center. So some of it is the same. If you're talking about a basic web server, you're going to configure things in pretty much the same way, possibly. Anyway, there are differences around that. That's a whole separate discussion. But typically, if you want to deploy a web server, you can do that in public cloud very quickly and easily within a couple of clicks and a couple of minutes. You go through, choose your web server, deploy it, and that's it. That's your web server. It's public on the internet. All you need to do is configure your application stack on that web server, so something like Apache or PHP or .NET, whatever your language of choice is. The difficulty comes in the tools that are used to deploy it, secure it, configure things like your interfaces, your routing, all of your security. That's very different. And if you look at AWS and you look at their certification track, there are numerous different tracks you can take, multiple certifications for multiple disciplines within the cloud, and that alone should give you an idea that moving into public cloud isn't the case of, I've just got to learn a few new buttons to click. If you look at the services catalog of something like AWS or Azure, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different services in there, all with their own very granular and somewhat complex settings. That can be quite a learning curve. So it's good to see that people recognize that they can't just go to public cloud. It's not a knee-jerk reaction to, this company's doing cloud, we want to do it too. There are some considerations here, and it is reassuring to see that people are aware of that. And there are some people that will go and have a go at public cloud without going through the necessary training or testing procedures. And I think it's pretty safe to say that those are typically the ones that will end up in the media for the wrong reasons.
So on that, from a commercial side, and what we've seen is there's less time talking to our clients about selling more traditional, can we help you with this? It's more of an educational space when talking to customers about cloud. So we're doing a lot of educational sessions and workshops within Checkpoint, things like our cloud community sessions, which are just discussions on what people are challenged with, how they're securing certain environments, the traditional meetup type conversations that you get now around cloud. We're also doing things like courses on fundamentals for developers, which gives the security teams more of an insight into the developers' world, more of an understanding of how code works. So those sorts of sessions help our traditional customers move into that legacy space. And also we run sessions for developers and security architects that are more born in the cloud to understand what we're trying to do to secure their environment and join the two teams together. So there is a list on our website of upcoming events, and we invite everybody on this call to either yourselves or your wider teams to see what we've got and see if there's something suitable that you can come and join. It's not something we charge for. It's something that we're running as an educational piece to help our customers and people that want to engage with Checkpoint to understand kind of the old world going into the new world, but what's needed in those new environments.
Yeah, those events, they're great, and they're useful for us to learn as a company as well, because if you know Checkpoint, we've been around for, I think, nearly 27 years now, and our heritage is very much in firewalls and security gateways. So for us to get out and speak to new types of customers, ones who are not necessarily traditional customers in terms of being network or firewall admins or your typical on-prem security guy, we want to learn from the people who are, to kind of coin the phrase, cloud native, people who have only ever worked in public cloud and who are building applications in the cloud. They haven't ever, configured a server in a rack or in a data center. Everything's done remotely. So it's really interesting for us to get out and speak to those customers as well. So if you do have any interest or anything to offer and share with us, with your peers around what you're doing in public cloud and what we're doing, and we can all have a talk around how we can help each other, then do come along, share your thoughts. It would be most appreciated. So that kind of leads nicely on to traditional cloud security tools. So this is an interesting point, especially for us at Checkpoint, like I say, who have our heritage in firewall technology. Quite often when we talk to customers, their plans involve doing what they've done for many years and trying to do that in public cloud. Now, we speak to quite a broad spectrum of customers. We've got customers who take the lift and shift approach, whereby they're seeing what people are doing in the industry and they're seeing that people are moving to public cloud, and they want to try that as well. And with the lift and shift approach, typically what they'll do is they'll take the architecture that they've had for many years in the data center and they'll replicate that or try to replicate it in public cloud. So you have your virtual network, whatever the naming convention of that might be in your platform of choice. Then you will have a perimeter gateway solution, hopefully Checkpoint. Then you've got your assets inside and you'll try to protect that kind of in a north-south protection style. Some of the public cloud platforms, they lend to that quite nicely, and they allow us to give you added benefits. So we haven't literally just taken our security gateway solution and dropped it into public cloud, even though as a Checkpoint software technology company, our main asset is software. That was a very easy transition for us to make. We have taken on some of the public cloud toolings to make that more efficient when it comes to public cloud. So for example, in Azure, we're able to use the user-defined routes and the routing technology to give you micro-segmentation capability and the ability to inspect what's going on from host to host. That doesn't necessarily work for all customers though. Like I mentioned with the cloud-native architectures, something like serverless as well. In that scenario, you don't even have necessarily the infrastructure to put a security gateway or a firewall into. So for that, we have to look at very new technology, and that's something which Checkpoint have been focusing a lot on in the last couple of years, which is technology which isn't security gateway and it isn't firewall based, it is purely cloud-based technology. And we'll talk a little bit about that once we've been through the last couple of points in the report. But here, it's good to know that people are aware that their tools don't necessarily work in public cloud in the same way, at least, that they have in the traditional data center world. So people know they've got to take on new approaches, and what they've relied on for many years doesn't necessarily scale to public cloud.
So it's also the view that there's only the native tools that will address these needs. Because it's cloud, it needs to be a cloud provider that will provide the answers, and that's not necessarily true. Our tools both complement the native tools, the security groups of this world and the Azure security gateways or Azure firewalls, and then on top of that we provide the functionality and the granularity that those cloud providers don't necessarily see in security, which is the depth and breadth that we provided in the data center. The challenge is always education around, actually, you need to look outside of the menu that you're given by your said cloud provider around, okay, this is a service and here are the options to secure it. Because they do limit you and push you down a path that is sometimes not the best route. So it comes back to that planning exercise. There is also a challenge also around budgets. People find that they're deploying cloud workloads and the security teams get involved. And unlike the traditional tools that have an element of planning and understanding of the costs and how they will grow into those tools or what's needed for the next 3 years, cloud is exponentially growing. So, there's not a fixed cost for protecting cloud. It's usually based on the percentage of the cloud or the number of assets. So again, that comes back to that kind of planning exercise to understand what's needed in this space, and getting out there and speaking to the likes of us and the public cloud providers to see what the best fit is for your business.
Well, one last kind of talking point on this slide is the limited functionality of the public cloud. So I've been to a few different talks where people say that the public cloud is insecure and you must have this particular solution in there for it to be secure. I don't necessarily agree that that's true. So the public cloud, any of the public cloud platforms, they're not an inherently insecure place to be. They've got many tools available to help protect your workloads and your infrastructure and your assets that you have in public cloud, but they're not necessarily either the most effective or the most intuitive. So if you went to one of the public cloud platforms and you wanted to only use the native tooling, then you could probably secure your assets to a reasonable degree doing that. But where we like to talk to customers is around giving you the advanced level of threat prevention that we've given customers for many years in data centers and private cloud environments. We want to help customers extend that to public cloud. So yes, there are tools available in public cloud, and I'm not going to say they're bad or ineffective. They are what they are, and in most cases they are a basic tool. So things like preventing layer 3 access, a basic ACL, network security group that you apply. That's great, but that takes you, in terms of technology, back 10 or 15 years where you're not looking at things like anti-malware protection or some of the technologies that we have around threat emulation or anti-bot. You're ignoring all of that. And if you're comparing your public cloud deployment to an on-premises deployment, if you speak to most network admins, they wouldn't dream of deploying any assets with no sort of anti-malware or no endpoint agent to protect it from file-based threats. So why is that different in public cloud? Top concerns. Sorry, Matt, Karen.
I was just going to say one last thing, like the native tools are tools, and what we're trying to work at being a checkpoint, same as we've done in our threat prevention space and our data center technology, is more of a platform. So not just a platform between our individual services to bring them into, for want of a phrase, single pane of glass, but also a platform that interoperates with the public cloud security tools, the native tools that you'd work with already, and also other vendors. One thing that we've learned as a vendor going into the cloud space, it's far more of a collaborative environment. So having a single tool that somebody needs to log into and register to see a single area of security or a single type of threat or security practice doesn't really work. You need something that is taking feeds from the native environment and other tools, and that's very much kind of what we're building out is a tool that via APIs, both the ones that we build and we partner with other vendors to pre-build for you, but you can use our tools as a platform to build upon. If you do that siloed environment, you end up with lots of silver bullets like we've seen in the data center space for years that become untenable to manage and, challenging around keeping the skill sets relevant. So rather than making those mistakes all over again in cloud, we're trying to educate people on actually, choose a platform rather than a tool to fix a problem.
So moving on to what people are most concerned about when it comes to moving to public cloud. This shouldn't be much of a surprise here, but data security and keeping control of your data is top of everyone's concern, and quite rightly so. It used to be the case that you would have to subscribe to a specialist security news outlet, something like the Register, or looking at different outlets on Twitter or something like that to see where the latest data breaches come from. But this is now firmly part of mainstream media, and you quite often see it on the BBC or you see it on your local news channel that there has been a massive data breach of X amount of million users. So much so that we've become a little bit apathetic to smaller breaches. So if it's not affecting more than tens of millions of users, it's just it's another breach. It's just day-to-day business. But that is a lot of users' data to be lost. And for me, I find it amazing how people have switched off to the smaller breaches. And I say small, we're still talking about hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of users. So that's not by any stretch a small data set for an attacker or a threat actor to leak or breach from a cloud service. So it's understandable that is forefront of people's minds. Data privacy and confidentiality, again, people are moving to public cloud and they're taking various sort of approaches to it. We've got customers who are very cautious about putting in customers' data, but then we've got customers who are, I don't want to say blasé, but they're seeing the risk as no greater or no less than the risk would be hosting a customer's data in a data center, which to some degree is right. And if they've got the right level of skill and expertise to configure the various services in public cloud, then yeah, I think that's a fair assessment that public cloud can be just as secure as data sitting in a data center, provided you've gone through the training and the certification potentially to make sure that the facilities you're using to store that are secure. So if we're talking about something like S3 buckets, this is kind of infamous when it comes to cloud security, and possibly for the wrong reasons. So S3 is Amazon AWS's storage facility, or one of them. And it's very convenient and it's very useful, and it's an easy way to host files for people to download directly from or to form part of a kind of broader architecture. And when you're deploying it from the offset, you do get some options for securing it, but for most people they will go for the option that is, it comes up with a warning and says, when you deploy this is this is a risk, this is insecure, but the trade-off is it's more convenient. So I think S3 in particular gets a bit of a bad reputation when it comes to public cloud security for the wrong reasons. The weak factor is people, and people want an easy ride when it comes to deploying these services. So they choose, like they have done for years, to look at security later, and the fabled later never comes, but they will deploy it first and worry about hardening it later on. And that's something which, again, we're looking to address with some of the tools that we'll cover shortly. Anything on that one, Matt?
No.
Perfect. So security threats, and this is something which Gartner have alluded to for a number of years. I know people have mixed feelings about Gartner, but this is something they've been fairly spot on with, in that most of the threats around public cloud will come from misconfiguration. And I'm fairly skeptical of some of the things that analysts come out with, because they're all thoughts or loose predictions, but this one I think is a fairly safe prediction. Given the complexity of the public cloud environments, yes, I can see that people should be concerned about misconfiguration, and that misconfiguration is going to lead to a number of breaches. And all you've got to do is look at the media, like I mentioned before, to see that yes, this has led to a number of breaches. Some of the more high-profile ones, like the one from 2019 involving a large financial enterprise, that breach was facilitated in a number of ways by poor configuration and poor hardening of the particular cloud environment. So the attacker managed to get in using sort of a known weakness or a known misconfiguration that is common in that environment, and they managed to move through the environment, again taking advantage of poor configuration, poor hardening, poor security of the different components of that environment, ultimately leading to them being able to get the customer data out of the environment fairly easily without too much scrutiny. So that one, I would say, is first and foremost anybody's top priority when it comes to moving into the public cloud, is make sure you have the visibility and the capability to enforce consistent configurations across whichever platform you're using. Don't worry about the more advanced threats, at least not straight away. The key thing to make sure that your presence in the public cloud is secure is make sure that you've got the basics set up correctly first. Most of these breaches, they're not because of APT crews targeting you, they're not because of nation-state threat actors or any advanced zero-day malware. It's simple misconfiguration. And again, coming back to something like an S3 bucket, which is very convenient and a very useful tool in the public cloud space to store your files and make them available to customers or other parts of your architecture, but make sure they're configured correctly. It is possible to configure them to be completely wide open, not just for read access, but also write access. And a couple of years ago, you might be familiar with the attacker threat actor crew, MageCart, the ones who were responsible for the British Airways attack. They have adapted their techniques now, so they're not looking for specifically targeted victims. They're now taking a broader approach to send out automated scanners that are looking for poorly configured S3 buckets, where rather than having to find an exploit in a particular piece of application code, they can just look for poorly configured permissions where people have left it wide open to the internet. So it's effectively just going up to a website and saying, I'm going to put in my credit card skimming code here. I don't really have to go through any particular effort to tailor that attack. I'm just going to spread it out there, shotgun style approach, and see what results I get back. And there have been, I think, hundreds, if not thousands of businesses that have been affected with this particular method of attack. So again, make sure the basics are done first before you move into the advanced threat prevention. And that's not to say that the advanced threat prevention isn't still important, but attackers are going to go for the weakest configuration point in your infrastructure, be it in your on-premises infrastructure or in the public cloud. If they've got an easy way to get into your network, they're going to go for that every time. They're not going to go for looking for advanced exploits or vulnerabilities or logic abuses in your application. They're going to go for the low-hanging fruit, and they're going to go for the easiest way to get in. So sounds like I'm labouring that point a bit, but I am. Make sure you've got the basics done first before you think about moving into the advanced threat prevention.
And we're seeing that. So our customers drive our focus from an R&D perspective, and the conversations we're having with customers over the last year, 18 months is understanding that build process and injecting security tools within CI/CD pipeline. And that our conversations with the customers more around that planning process type conversation that it is around just checking the workloads that are out there. The tools that we've got initially started in that compliance report space, this is how secure you are, and we've very much in the last 8 to 12 months moved more into an environment where we are looking at protecting it as it's being built. So you don't have a workload that's potentially open to attack, because in the build phase and the CI/CD phase, all the checks and balances are done, and that involves working with CI/CD or with the developers on the CI/CD approach, and back to a stage before that, the planning and the workshop. So we at Checkpoint have done this multiple times with multiple customers. You guys might be doing it for the first time or have done it a couple of times. You reach out and get us involved. We've got the experience in that space to help you. And it's not about a widget conversation. It's just about what we've seen in the market. There's not enough customers of ours and clients out there taking people's advice on what they've seen before they decide on a tool, decide on an approach. There are information channels out there, but most of them are vendor-led, but you'll find that it is more an informed kind of process than I definitely need these 4 tools to be protected. If you don't take it back a stage and look at how things are built and how things are checked in the early stages, then the tools you subsequently buy to protect only might be seeing parts of those environments.
Yeah, the security consideration, and there's a big kind of drive around shift left technology. Again, something that we'll cover briefly when it comes to looking at our CloudGuard platform. But doing the security earlier on in the cycle ultimately makes things a lot easier. So if you have that conversation before you've deployed all the architecture, then you get the mammoth task of securing all of these different components that may or may not be able to be secured in the way that you're planning, owing to the way you've deployed them, for example. Then if you do this earlier, you're going to make things easier for yourself. It's a small investment early on to make sure that later on in the process, in your cloud journey, deployment, whatever you want to call it, things are going to be easier. And you're going to make sure that you don't have any unexposed areas when you've put in something like an automated configuration checking utility. Key capability. So moving away from the doom and gloom of what people are worried about and what they're doing wrong. What are people doing right when it comes to public cloud, and what are the capabilities that people want, and what are they deploying when it comes to public cloud environments? So almost 70% of people are using some form of access control, which is really promising. Now, I've mentioned that the access control capabilities, at least the free and the basic ones in the public cloud platforms, they are quite basic, they are quite limited, but at least people are using them. Most people now appreciate the security benefit of having a firewall in a traditional environment. You wouldn't get many customers who would argue that point and say we don't need a firewall at all, we're just going to connect directly to the internet. So people have extended that out to public cloud, and they see that using access control, be it a basic security group or an ACL or something to at least put some filtering on what comes into and what leaves your cloud environments, that's a good thing. People are aware of this. What surprised me in this, though, is that 53% of people have deployed antivirus, anti-malware, or some sort of file-based scanning solution. Now, bringing this back to the on-premises in the traditional world, again, I mentioned this before, but I don't think there are many network administrators or security teams that you would speak to that would be happy not having some type of anti-malware presence in that network. So again, why is this acceptable when it comes to public cloud that, almost half of your networks don't have that type of security tooling? So it is available. It's something that we offer. It's something that you can get through a couple of the public cloud providers as well. And I don't know if this comes back to, again, the sort of myth that in public cloud it's not a risk, or that the cloud provider takes care of it for you, but it most definitely is something that you need to address in public cloud, especially if you're running something like a web operation, some sort of web presence where customers are providing files. If you've got some sort of storage, again, go back to the S3 example, if you've got something like that where you're storing files, how do you know that if that part of your application is receiving files from the public, people that are potentially untrusted, and then they get synchronized to something in your on-prem, your data center world, if you're not scanning that and you're treating the public cloud as a trusted extension of your network, that is just inviting trouble into your network. So if you're not scanning it in the public cloud, then I think that's a bit of a misstep there. And it's something which you need to consider when you're looking at deploying a solution into these environments. Multi-factor authentication, I think this probably maps quite closely with on-premises networks. It's something which is proven and demonstrated to reduce the amount of attacks when it comes to authentication style attacks, credential stuffing, breach credentials. If you've got multi-factor authentication enabled in your environment for your services, it makes it very difficult for attackers to gain access to that account, because you need to have that SMS or that email or that app-based authentication to be the final step to let you in. So for customers not using this in public cloud, I find this a little worrying, but no more worrying than it would be in the on-premises world. So again, this is just a common factor when it comes to extending your network to public cloud. You need to consider multi-factor authentication, and some of the platforms are quite nagging when it comes to setting up accounts in their platforms that, yes, you've got a user account, great, you need to have a complex password, and you really, really need to set up multi-factor authentication. Some of them will keep nagging you if you don't set that up. The other factors, data encryption, cloud data backup, firewalls, NAC kind of crosses over into access control, application protection as well. They're not advanced technologies, but again, bringing it back to what we see with our traditional network customers, these technologies which we still don't see all of our customers adopting, and our marketing from 2 or 3 years ago around Gen 5 or now Gen 6 preventions, the idea behind that is that customers are quite slow in adopting the bleeding edge technology. So we found that typically customers are around what we call Gen 3, Gen 2, some of them are Gen 2.8 I think was the average, where the technology they're adopting is sort of middle of the road for what we can offer. So it's not as basic as pure firewalling and preventing access or intrusions based on IPs and ports, but it's not as advanced as zero-day threat emulation, sandboxing, and the threat extraction capability that we have. Typically, it would be firewalling plus some anti-malware plus maybe IPS. So if you think how old IPS is in the grand scale of things, you can see how that maps to this type of adoption of those more comprehensive technologies. So nothing too surprising there when it comes to public cloud, but still just as worrying as it is in traditional networks that people aren't taking up the technologies that are quite readily available now. Anything on that, Matt, or have I waffled too much about the techie side of things?
No, covered it all. All good.
All good. So they're kind of the key findings from our report, and if you want to have a look at the report, you can either download it from, I think you'll get an email with all of the assets associated with the talk after the presentation. I think I've had mine come through already. Or you can go to checkpoint.com and you can download a full copy of the report and have a look through. And there's one interesting slide which isn't in here, which is the breakdown of who contributed to this report. So you can still see things like what the DevOps user base is when it comes to this type of report, who's doing DevSecOps, and what the breakdown is of the respondents to this, which is quite interesting. I didn't put it in here because it's quite a heavy slide, but that's all available. We've also got some other assets available to download through the panel, so do take a look there. Now, with all of these challenges in mind and these security concerns, we've, of course, going to link this into how we can help you protect against these. And I think it's fair to say that with each of the concerns that we have covered in the report, you can break them down into three main areas: visibility, prevention, and governance. So on the visibility side of things, if you can't see what's going on in your public cloud or even in your private cloud or on-premises environment, you've got pretty much no hope of securing it. So if you've got assets and you've got servers or instances, it doesn't matter where they're running. If you don't know that they're there, if you don't know that they're running, how are you going to assess what risk they pose to your business? The first thing you need to make sure that any tool offers you is visibility and clear visibility across the multiple platforms. So if you're one of the customers who is adopting multi-cloud for your application deployment, you need to make sure that you've got consistent visibility across each of those public cloud platforms before you can even think of taking stock of what you've got and securing it. The next step is prevention. Now, this is something which Checkpoint have been very keen on for almost as long as we've been around. Detection is well and good, and it's, I suppose, useful to have an email that says, we've noticed something bad in environment X, you need to go off and fix it. But it's not as good as saying, we have found something that poses a threat in this particular environment, don't worry about it, we have fixed it. We've got rid of the threat, we've got rid of the file-based malware, we've got rid of the misconfiguration issue that you've got in your public cloud. So on this, you've got something to give you that guarded approach to deploying your infrastructure. So you can go off and you can deploy and you can adopt something like public cloud very quickly and very easily. As long as you've got something in the background that's, keeping an eye on what you're doing and making sure what you're doing is secure and configured to best practices, that's a good thing. Detection, yeah, it's okay. Prevention and active enforcement of what you're doing in these environments is far better. And that's where we aim for with all of our solutions. And then there's governance. Sorry, Matt.
I was just going to say, and the key to that is continuous automation. So again, a big change in the new world is the fact that nothing stands still. So no time for change control and processes. It's got to be built in a way that it's constantly evolving and constantly keeping up with the workload. So having that automation built into these threat prevention tools is key.
Definitely, completely agree. So one of the new parts, it's not really new, I think GDPR has brought it to the forefront of most people's minds, is governance as well. So if you're using a traditional data center environment, compliance is something that you've probably encountered at some point, be it GDPR in more recent times, or ISO 27001, ISO 9000, or PCI DSS in kind of more traditional frameworks. Some customers that we speak to think that when it comes to public cloud, this is not their concern in that environment. But when it comes to the assessments, you are using the public cloud as an extension of your network, and as such, you have to make sure that you are just as compliant in that environment as you are in your traditional environment. So you need to make sure that you've got an easy and a consistent way to make sure that your security controls and your checks and your governance is taken care of equally as consistently as it is in public cloud as it is in the private cloud world. So with all of this in mind, this is where some of our new platforms and our new technologies are geared towards. So CloudGuard, it's recently renamed. We've had CloudGuard for a few years now, and it's covered various different things, but in the last couple of months, we have gone through a bit of a rebranding to make things simpler to understand. So when it comes to cloud security, be it public or private cloud, CloudGuard is the name of our platform to offer you the protections that we've talked about: visibility, threat detection and prevention, and governance control over those platforms. So some of these things you're probably quite familiar with. Starting at the top, we've got public and private cloud network security. This used to go by the name of CloudGuard IS, and going back a bit further, VSec. This is our tried, tested and trusted security gateway technology. So this runs in public cloud, private cloud, pretty much wherever you want to run it, and it will give you a consistent set of controls using the Checkpoint security management solution that everyone knows and hopefully loves, and it gives you a real easy single management interface for managing your network security regardless of the environment it's running in. Moving on to cloud security posture management, which you might know under the name of Dome 9, which again has recently been renamed to move away from kind of unique names that don't really describe what it does to something more descriptive: Cloud Security Posture Management, CSPM. This is our platform for giving you visibility into the public cloud environments and enforcing consistent controls across any of the environments that you're using. Then we've got workload protection. So if you're using something like Kubernetes or you're using AWS Lambda and you want to extend your security out to those environments, the traditional approach with the network security, so a security gateway or a firewall piece, that's not necessarily going to work in those environments. So for that, we have some new technologies which give you a very similar level of protection, but without being a huge monolithic firewall device or instance that you deploy at the perimeter of that environment, which, as you might know, in those environments isn't always possible. Then we've got web application and API protection. This is a brand new technology for Checkpoint, and this is an agent-based solution to give you protection of your workload regardless of where it is or whether it's cloud, public or private. This will give you your OWASP style protection and API protection for your workloads, your instances, wherever they're running. Then we've got cloud intelligence and threat hunting. Again, this has been renamed recently. Used to be called Logic. This gives you a SIEM-like experience, but completely cloud-based. So if you want to investigate your logs for public cloud or the API events that are happening in your public cloud, we have a platform that allows you to investigate that and also tie it into our Threat Cloud platform. So without too much of a history lesson, Threat Cloud is Checkpoint's global intelligence database. So any Checkpoint component that customers have got deployed over the world, they act as sensors effectively. So they benefit from and contribute to this global intelligence database, and it gives us a very easy facility to say, for example, if you've got some assets in your network which are communicating to an IP address, we can tell you if that IP address is good or bad. So if it's good, we don't care, we can carry on as normal. If it's bad, we can tell you how bad it is if it belongs to a scanner or a botnet or a command and control server. And then we give you the capability to take an automatic reaction to that. So as part of our CloudGuard platform, we have a very comprehensive compliance and posture management engine. Part of that engine allows you to trigger automatic reactions to address and fix common misconfigurations in public cloud. So in the example with the data from Threat Cloud, if you want to perhaps turn an instance off if it's talking something bad and might be giving indicators that that asset has been compromised, you can automate that being turned off. Or if you don't want to be quite as terminal, you could apply a security rule to it that says, I want to quarantine this host and I want to prevent network access until one of my SOC analysts have been through and analysed that instance or that asset to make sure there are no vulnerabilities or compromises found in that particular asset. If you wanted to just send a notification out to whatever your collaboration tool is, drop a message in Slack, log a ticket into ServiceNow, you can do that. Again, most of these services are tick box integrations. If you're using something which isn't named here, we give you the functionality to call out of the platform and integrate pretty much any third-party platform via simple API calls. So we're building a very comprehensive platform. It's growing all the time. Matt mentioned earlier, one of the newer capabilities that we've got is the ability to integrate into DevOps or DevSecOps workflows. So if you were looking to assess your assets for all the things we've talked about, misconfiguration, compliance and threat detection and prevention, we can give you that, but now in a pipeline environment. So we can assess an asset that doesn't strictly exist yet through something like Terraform or CloudFormation or ARM if you're using Azure. And we can tell you that for what you're wanting to deploy, this may or may not be compliant with something like GDPR. So if we detect, for example, let's talk about GDPR, if you're accidentally deploying an asset into a non-EU region, we can flag that and we can prevent that before it becomes a problem, rather than running a compliance check on vast amounts of infrastructure that you've got deployed, then detecting that somebody has either deliberately or mistakenly deployed it into a non-compliant region, and then having to go through and manually remediate and fix everything, moving it, migrating regions, stopping services, bringing them back up, changing the addressing, etc. That could be a real hassle. Whereas if you take the shift left approach and you do the security piece first, that will tell you, actually, you can't deploy this because you've made a small mistake here. If you address it early on, any infrastructure that you get deployed will more or less be consistently compliant with what you've chosen to deploy based on your company requirements. So it's a really good platform. It's a really interesting platform. It's completely different to anything you might be familiar with from Checkpoint. It's pretty much, apart from the Threat Cloud tie-in, not related to our firewall technology whatsoever. There are various integrations, but if you've got a new cloud deployment and you're thinking that Checkpoint, they're just the firewall guys, completely not. Come and talk to us, get a demo of our CloudGuard technology, try it out for yourself, and we'd be happy to talk with you and talk through some of the situations that we can deploy this technology into with you.
So just on that, I think Stu's covered it, but just for clarity, one of the unique things about what we're doing is this is a single entity. So on that slide, you might have seen different ways that we address the security, like workload protection, posture management, compliance. This is within a single tool, so we don't use a separate tool to check CI/CD and the vulnerabilities in the shift left side from what we do. It's a single policy in a single platform. So if you're working towards a gold build or a golden image for your organisation for security in the cloud, once that's built within the platform, everything you do and everything that it subsequently checks at code level or in existing workloads is against that posture that you've built, that set of rules and level of security that you've set as your organisation. You don't need to flip between different tools or have interoperability in the background. This is that platform that we're building out rather than trying to combine things that were already out there in the market.
Yeah, so if you want to try that out, if that sounds interesting, or you just want to have a look through the platform, let us know and we can set you up with a free demo and an assessment of your cloud environment. We can get you some checkup reports. So if you're someone that's quite new to public cloud and you want to get a feel for how good or how bad things are in public cloud, hopefully it's good. Nobody likes to get a report full of bad things. We can give you that insight very quickly and easily. It's a case of joining your account up, providing a few details, storing that in the platform, then that will talk to the cloud platform, automatically assess everything for you and give you a very quick and easy to digest report. If that's interesting, let us know, or again, use some of the assets that you've got in the Bright Talk panel or you get from your attendee email. Get in touch with us. If there's anything we can help with, we're more than happy to help out.
Just on that point of the assessment, unlike traditional tools that take configuration, like Stuart said, it's very easy to configure, but it's also completely non-intrusive. So we encourage customers to run assessments on production environments in the biggest cloud estate, because essentially all we're doing is reading information. We can't interrupt the process. We can't change what's already happening at the level that we do the assessment. We can obviously do that when we're licensed to do the read-write, but from an assessment perspective, non-intrusive, which means that you can check what's out there without any fear of upsetting the apple cart, essentially.
Yep, it can be completely hands-off until you've decided that this is the tool you want and you want to move off, and then you want it to start automating things for you. It's completely up to you how you want to deploy it. So do let us know. Got one question. What is the top tip to prepare for 2021? Blimey. Okay, I think it's got to be kind of the foundation to one of the points we covered around misconfiguration. Misconfigurations are still going to be a top concern for people doing anything in public cloud, whatever the platform is. Misconfiguration is something you need to be very aware of. But underpinning that, I think, is visibility. Now, the cloud platforms do give you certain tools to see what you've got, but they can be quite hard to take in. So make sure you have got the fullest possible visibility of all you've got deployed in public cloud. Cloud is it's a great tool, if you can call the massive covering that is cloud as a single tool. It's a great platform. And there are a number of services in there which can make things very quick and very easy, but also very different to what you've done in the traditional sense back in your data center world. So make sure you know what you're configuring. And with public cloud, it's very easy to start using new services. Once you've started using one of the platforms, you'll see new things and think, oh, actually, I could use this and I can use that. And as your team grows and your public cloud experience grows, you'll start taking more and more things on without necessarily keeping track of what you're doing. So again, visibility, make sure you've got track of what you've deployed and what risk it presents to you as a business. If that's something you do struggle with, then come and speak to us. That's something which our platform can help with very quickly and very easily.
From my side, it's engage early. From a tip perspective, you don't need to be doing large cloud workloads. You could be very early into your adoption of cloud or even not actually taking any actions yet. Engage us early, lean on our experience of cloud transition, lean on our experience of what we see with our customers. At all levels, essentially, we're always working with our large enterprise customers that are bleeding edge, and we can use that knowledge to empower you with not making similar mistakes or taking the right path early on. So I can't encourage it enough to engage us, talk to our experts, understand what we see as pitfalls and challenges, but also the easier route to take. So if you don't know your Checkpoint representative, our details are on the Bright Talk and easy to kind of reach out to me, and I'll put you in touch with the relevant people to have those workshops and have those sessions and do that early planning to get it right earlier on rather than having to re-engineer.
Yep, definitely. Again, reach out to your account manager, your SE, your partners, or if you can't get in touch with them or you don't have a preferred partner, then feel free to drop us a message on LinkedIn and we'll put you in touch with the right people. Thank you all for your time. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.